Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay, and today we're going to further our discussion and investigation into the world of non-duality. And the guest we have is Tejo. Hi Tejo.
Hi.
And Tejo's had a really interesting life, and it's somewhere paralleled my life in the kind of things he's done. He was a sanyassin in the Rajneesh movement. He's now in the Ridhwan school, which I've been in for many years. So there's many things we have in common. But let's start off first of all, Tejo, with your childhood. And you were telling me earlier you actually had your first spiritual experience when you were 15 years old.
Yeah, I am a product of the English boarding school system. And so I came from a family where spiritual was basically church on Sundays and chapel every day at school. And no mention of anything other than the sort of fire and brimstone. And it was at Shrewsbury School where I went. I snuck down in the middle of the night to have a cigarette in my study.
So you were a bit of a rebel, weren't you?
I went that road pretty quick after I hit puberty. And I was sitting there, I'd smoked the cigarette, and I was sitting there and I was listening to the silence, and I suddenly realized what I was doing. And I started listening and listening and listening. And the silence became louder and louder and louder until in that sudden moment, the reality kind of shifted. And, well, two things happened. The silence became a kind of orchestra of the most amazing kind of music. I can't really describe it. And I, as I knew myself, was gone. And the experience probably didn't last for more than maybe 3-4 seconds. But it was enough to change, I think it was enough to start to change the course of my life, because I got really curious about what had happened.
But weren't you a bit scared as well?
Well, it was that ended the experience. The moment I realized, some self-reflection came back in, and I recognized what I was doing, and that ended the experience. So, yes, it was fear. I remember the fear of not being there.
Yes.
So some part of me had not completely gone that was able to recognize you're not there.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because I was talking about our parallels. Well, that's what happened to me a lot when I was younger, was this feeling I wasn't there, and I had just no context or anything, and it was very difficult time in terms of there wasn't then much information available in terms of books to read or tapes to listen to or anything else.
That was a part of it. There was no one to even talk to about it.
Yeah.
Although I had already friends at school who were reading the Bhagavad Gita and the Quran and different things like that. So there was some outlet for me.
So anyway, you had the experience, and the impact obviously stayed with you, and that encouraged you to read some spiritual books.
Yep. In fact, that set me a little bit on fire, because I wanted more of that. Whatever it was, I knew I wanted more. And of course, it was the early 70s, so the way that it seemed that people were getting more of that was with drugs. Although I was, because I was in an English boarding school, there wasn't exactly access to a lot of that. But eventually that came along my way, and I took some LSD with a friend on Ascension Day, actually. We got the day off from school. And then I had a prolonged experience of what I would call being gone.
Okay.
And the way I remember expressing it, I was in the park in Shrewsbury, was that I've stepped into God's land. And that's what it was like for pretty much most of the trip. And that accelerated my... I think after that I realized that if something this big could make me feel that way, it wasn't anything much to do with this thing. And that's when I started really my spiritual search.
So somehow the drug gave you a further taste,
Exactly.
and it confirmed what had happened before without the drug, and you knew there was something there that you wanted to pursue as such.
Exactly. There was... It was more than something that I wanted to pursue. It consumed me.
Yeah.
I started reading, I started talking. Led me to my first encounter group when I was 16 and a half.
So this is very young to do an encounter group.
Yeah, I met a guy. I just sort of happened to meet a guy, Alan Lowen.
Yeah, I know Alan. Yeah.
You know Alan? Yeah. Well, I walked into the back of a house and he was sitting there and he asked me something no one had really asked me before. Is, do you know what you're experiencing? And I said, I don't. And that was such a fascinating question for me that it led me down the sort of encounter group road for a while.
It's a great question, isn't it? Do you know what you're experiencing?
Yeah. It takes you to the heart of where you are in any given moment. And back then where I was I was 16-and-a-half-year-old rebellious teenager and with raging hormones. But there was a corralling of some of that in a particular direction. And it was there that I first did my first Osho meditations.
So which is Osho is Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh.
Right,
yeah.
thanks, yeah. He became Osho after some years. And eventually that took me to India. I think I arrived in Poona when I was 18.
And I think you were telling me you went overland to Poona.
Yes,
India.
I did.
It must have been a fun trip in itself.
It was an amazing trip.
Yeah.
And again, actually, I was reading the Book of the Secrets, which is was Bhagwan's sort of treatise on different meditations. And I'd already started trying all the meditations, and I was just fascinated by it. So that's what took me to him.
You got to Poona, and what happened there?
Well, not what I expected. I got there and I just, sat my A-levels and gotten out of school, and the freedom of being in India kind of bowled me over a bit. And I went a little bit down the drug road for a while and did all kinds of crazy things and went to Goa. And then, actually I went to Goa after, because Osho suggested I go and blow off steam in Goa. And, but I took, on April the 1st, 1977, I took, it's today anniversary.
April the 1st?
Yeah, I had my first darshan with Bhagwan. And again, another taste of this, I'm gone.
So did it have the same quality as the drug, as a drug experience and the experience when you were 15, or was there something different about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. There was something different about it, and what was different about it was that there was a context for this that made sense. Here's a spiritual teacher, I'm supposed to be having this kind of experience with him, so there was some safety that came with the experience, and a lot of support around for having that kind of experience. In fact, not only support, but it was almost, it was what was happening. I was not alone. Yeah, that was another part of it.
Yeah, and that support is so important. If you have it in isolation, that can be hard to deal with.